someone asked me, this was right after the transition happened. And we've just seen incredible growth. It's been pretty amazing to watch what God's done in the last few years. And someone asked me over dinner one night, they go, why are you growing? Why do you think LCBC is growing like it is? And I was so exposed. I didn't have a good answer. And that bothered me. And so I went back and I dug in. And by the way, everyone should have an answer to that question. Why is God, if your church is growing, why? And the way to get to that answer is not complicated. All you need to do is...
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. Hey, I love if you're a next-gen leader and you're tuning in. A lot of you are taking over for legacy pastors. Boomers, Gen Xers who have stepped aside, maybe they founded the church. Jason Mitchell is one of them, and he's leading one of the largest churches in the country, LCBC in Pennsylvania. We talk about the emotion of succession, how preaching has changed, what it's like to take over this huge mega church, and what creates 280% more likelihood that visitors are going to come back. We're going to get into all of that. So we get into everything with you today on the podcast. I would love for you to like, subscribe, maybe leave a comment to join the conversation. And before I dive in with Jason, we very carefully select our partners. Have a look. They've got something cool for you. Then we'll dive into the interview. Today's episode is brought to you by Subsplash. So you know what? I've always thought of summer as a time to retool, to rethink, to reimagine. What if the summer wasn't just about VBS and mission trips, but about finally engaging and updating the way your church engages people? For a lot of pastors, digital tools still feel like a temporary patch from the pandemic, but the truth is, discipleship now depends on meaningful, gospel-centered engagement way outside of Sunday morning. And if you're still juggling multiple platforms or worse, relying on big tech to share all of your content, hey, it's time for a change. With Subsplash, move from scattered to streamlined, from media, giving, apps, messaging, event management, all in one platform built for the church, built for your church. Because every day you wait, families scroll past your content, new visitors bounce off your website, which are probably outdated, and your community misses moments to connect with Jesus. So don't just survive the summer slump. Use it to simplify, upgrade, and reignite your ministry for all the seasons ahead. Go to subsplash.com. Here's what's cool. You'll get $500 when you sign up. That's subsplash.com/Carey to save $500 when you sign up. Hey, this episode is brought to you by the Art of Leadership Academy. So if this podcast is part of your growth and rhythm in leadership, I think you're going to love what I'm going to share with you. Inside my Art of Leadership Academy, we have just opened up a few brand new spaces for you to lead more effectively and grow your leadership. And the price, you're going to love it. It's absolutely free. So what I would love for you to do is go and set up your free account today, because you're going to be able to join a life-giving online community. Think social media, but only for pastors and church leaders who are looking to grow and support each other. You can cut the noise, the trolls, the junk you get everywhere else. Actually, it's just a community of church leaders who really care about the mission of the church. I would love for you to be involved. And the big part of this is you'll be able to connect with other podcast listeners about each episode of my podcast, including me. I'm going to be active on there. You'll get exclusive insights by asking questions, sharing insights, and learning how others are applying what they're learning on this podcast to real life situations in their church and ministry or their business. So everything you get will help you lead more effectively, to grow faster and thrive in life and leadership. I'd love for you to get started today. And here's how you do it. Create a free account. It's pretty simple. Click the link in the description of this episode or visit theartofleadershipacademy.com. Couple clicks, you're in. It's free. Look forward to seeing you inside. Jason, welcome. Good to have you.
It's great to be with you, Carey. It's every time we've gotten a chance to interact, I've so enjoyed it, and so very, very grateful to be with you.
Well, you got into leadership, like you started on staff. I think you were how old? Were you 23 when you started at LCBC?
Yeah, 23 years old. Came up here, moved up to Pennsylvania, Jenny and I, from deep south. We were in Georgia at the time, and we had never lived outside of the South. And sort of our image of Pennsylvania was pretty much the Rocky movies. That's all we knew. And so,
right.
we thought Pennsylvania was one gigantic city,
like
just
Philly.
Philadelphia.
It was Philly?
Yeah. Yeah. So they came up here and obviously we're shocked at just how incredible the culture is up here in Pennsylvania and beautiful and the people and all that. And we just fell in love obviously with the church.
Fell in love with Amish culture or what?
Well, we're based in Lancaster County. And so Lancaster County.
I've been. It's like a lot of Amish.
There are some Amish here. Yeah. So it's a very interesting, Lancaster County in particular is kind of very diverse culturally because you do have, the Amish but you've got a real burgeoning sort of arts community down in the city of Lancaster, and agriculture is big here, and also health and different industries. So it's a very eclectic kind of thing, which we would have never known had we not come up here. So it was fun 23 years ago. Yeah. So I've been up here 23 years now. So
why did you pick Pennsylvania? Particularly Lancaster. At 23, it's kind of a random choice, right?
It's a very random choice. It honestly had to do with Jenny and I. We had finished up college, and I knew that God was leading my heart to be in vocational ministry. Mm-hmm. And we were doing student ministry at the time down in Georgia, and we had seen and tasted what it felt like to be a part of a church that was reaching, and particularly with student ministry, that was reaching kids who were broken, and you didn't have to dress the part, look the part, play the part to be a part of what we were doing. And they were coming in and finding hope in Jesus. And we wanted to be a part of a church. And this is what happens a lot of times at churches where the student ministry is kind of doing that, but the larger church isn't willing. There's kind of a gap between those two things. And that was kind of the what we were experiencing as well. And so we knew we wanted to be a part of a church that was putting their money where their mouth was as far as reaching people who are far from God. And so anyways, all that to say, we just knew we weren't seeing a lot of opportunities down where we were in that part of Georgia, down south. Now, this was 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago. So there wasn't, it's very different today, the church landscape. But back then it was a bunch of, religious places that were meeting in the needs of religious people, and at least in our area. And so we weren't going to settle for that. And I had a mentor in college. His name was Doug White. And Doug had a connection to LCBC. And so he, which at that point stood for Lancaster County Bible Church. So the acronym Lancaster County Bible Church, it stands for something different today, which we can talk about in a second. But Doug handed me a packet of information about this church, and he knew our heart. And he's like, this church is doing it. This church is reaching people. Fit. Yeah, they were one location at the time when you were 23? One location. So this would have been 2002, and so even the multi-site movement was very, very, very new. I think maybe only one or two at that point were even kind of diving into that. So that wasn't even in my head. I hadn't even heard of a multi-site church in 2002. Yeah. So.
Well, and you have a lot of young leaders listening. It was probably, maybe it was obvious, but I'm guessing it was not very obvious at 23 that one day you would be the lead pastor. Is that fair?
No, not at all. What was obvious was I want to reach people. I felt compelled to reach people. One of the things I feel like I've got to always do, Carey, with our staff even, is remind them of what got them into this thing in the first place. And it's so easy when you're growing and you got a lot more zeros than you used to have, that it becomes about that, and it becomes about growth, and it becomes about, the numbers and all that. And if you're not careful, you forget it was never about that. I got into this because I worked a summer camp down in Florida, and my whole world got changed when I led a 10-minute devotional for a group home of kids who were waiting to get placed into adoption. And I led that devotion. I'd never done that before. And I left leading that 10-minute devotional. I studied like 5 hours for it. It was like so intense. And, but I left that and go, man, I want to do that the rest of my life. And that summer at camp, there was a kid named John who gave his life to Christ. And John and I continued to stay in touch and got him plugged into a church, and he started growing. John's why I got in this. And it wasn't about leading a church. It wasn't about a big church. It wasn't about any of that. It was about John. And I just wanted to see more of that. And so I think that was always the burden I felt. Obviously, if God continues to do that, you're going to see growth. And but that was never the point. It was for one more John for me.
Stepping into leadership, and it was student ministry when you were 23. Yep. The 20s, your 20s, and we have a lot of young leaders listening, is a really pivotal decade. I think I remember very clearly when I was 23, I was still in school. I was in school till I was almost 30 because law, theology, right? Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. But I remember those years very almost like they were happening in real time. What were some of the lessons that you learned in your 20s that prepared you for where you are now?
Well, I think, to me, the 20s are such incredibly, I love the 20s because you've got the energy, you've got so much energy. You got about as much energy as you are ever going to have.
Almost too much. Yeah.
Almost too much. Don't know quite what to do with it. You're incredibly idealistic. And I think that's a positive. I love that. I love that in our 20-something staff. And there's an aspect of it where your inexperience causes you to take risk. And I feel like in the 20s, there was a sense of optimism with the teams that we were leading and the other 20-somethings that I was leading with that, hey, why not? It's always a why not? Why couldn't we? And I actually think that if you can carry that spirit over with obviously more wisdom as you advance and as you get older and you've kind of taken your knocks a little bit and you can add some of that in, but you keep that entrepreneurial spirit, you keep that zeal, you keep that the passion that that 20s have. And so I just felt like I was in an environment in my 20s. The thing that prepared me was I was given opportunities to take risk. I was given opportunities to do things that hadn't been tried before in student ministry, here at the time. And I don't know, there was something about learning to fail in your 20s that I think serves you really well as you continue to go and advance in leadership. And just the opportunities that I was given to take risks. That was a big deal for me. Even now, again, this just happened today where we had someone on our staff, there was an issue, something they posted. This is things we got to deal with now. And it just felt off. Well, this thing that got posted, their supervisor is a very young leader in our organization, younger than the person who was doing the thing. And our executive team, we were talking about some of our leadership team, and they were going to sweep in and address this. And I kind of just told them, put the brakes on it. I was like, let that supervisor who's late 20s, let them address this. This is an opportunity. And I think what happens is the larger you grow, the more it feels at stake. And there is, and the more risk, averse you tend to become. But we miss moments of giving young 20-somethings leaders opportunities to fail and have that kind of that leadership conversation that she needed to have. Because it's just easier. We've been there, we've done that, we've got the experience. And so you've got to, instead of going and doing it, role play with that young 20-something leader, then let them go do it. And if they fail at it, they fail at it. But that's how they grow. And I was just given a ton of opportunities like that. And just kind of like, hey, we're going to throw you in the water, figure out how to swim here.
I want to drill down on that a little bit more because I feel like when I was in my 20s, I was given ridiculous amounts of freedom and responsibility, including stupid amounts of freedom to fail. That was true in law. They kind of threw me into the deep end for the year I spent there. That was true when I started out in ministry. And the older I get, the more I realize, wow, they really trusted me. And I love your example, but I'm not sure a lot of young leaders get that kind of autonomy today. I think you're right. If you're larger, we're now all connected. And so you got some big brother, big sister looking over your shoulder going, oh, I'll handle that for you. Or let me give you advice. I mean, do you see that trend? And the second part of that is, how are you making sure, as a leader in your 40s now, that you are giving proper freedom to leaders in their 20s as per your example?
Well, it's a discipline. I think it's a discipline. It doesn't come naturally because it is easier and it's more efficient to step in and to do some of those things. And you don't want to be stupid either. Like there has been a dumb tax paid on certain things. And so I don't want...
And you're not going to take the whole church down over...
No. So there's nuance to it. And there's context to it. However, I think you're right. Like the things that you're willing, the things that I was given, opportunities I was given, I challenge our staff with this sometimes, like we still have to give those opportunities, even though it feels like there's more at risk. And actually, to be honest, we can do that in a safer way now because we do have way more safeguards than we did even then, organizationally speaking. So to me, it's a discipline and it's values based. The reason why it matters to me is because there's a value of leadership development within our culture. I think that I carry pretty strongly. It's we've got 5 values that we live and die by. And one of those is to empower and activate people. We talk about all the time. And those are 2 very intentional words. Empowerment is to give them the right tools and give them what they need to thrive. Activating them is putting them in the right positions to win. And so you can empower someone, not put them in the right positions to win. You can put them in positions to win, but you didn't empower them, and both are going to fail. And so we talk about that all the time. It's a posture. And if it's a posture, that means we've got to always be thinking. It's just always thinking, okay, is this a development opportunity? So again, the role that I need to take now is not to not be involved. I'm still going to be involved. The way I'm going to be involved, though, is not to go have the conversation, but to role play with that young staff before she has the conversation. So that's my greatest contribution to her now. I could go have the conversation, and it would be a lot quicker. It'd be done sooner, and I've done it. That just wouldn't help. That wouldn't create a culture that a church and a leadership culture that we're looking to create, to where we truly have empowered and activated all the way down through the organization.
You hinted at this earlier. You said when you add a lot more zeros, it becomes a little more taxing. Success makes you conservative. How, now that you're in that senior seat, how have you carried that sense of adventure and risk-taking with you from your 20s into your 40s? And how has that possibly changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do. There's something to be said about, there is a lot at stake. So I'm not trying to minimize that. And I think we're foolish if we treat, I'm not talking about being flippant. So that's different. I think flippant is, hey, it doesn't matter. It matters a lot. I think at the end of the day, how I'm trying to carry that over right now is to take risk that I know we're not going to. What did you say a moment ago? You're not betting the farm on everything. You're not putting the mission at risk. But we're going to, there's 2 types of innovation. There's probably more, but two fundamental types of innovation. One is frontier innovation, and that is something that's never been done before. The other is adjacent innovation. And adjacent innovation is taking something that's been done and making it better. I would say the majority of innovation happens for most people in that adjacent innovation space. Even think about Apple. They didn't invent the phone, but they took existing technology and made it better. So even that's, we think about them as it was one of the most innovative companies in the world, and they are, but it's adjacent innovation. I think one of the things from an innovation standpoint that we need to release ourselves, leaders should release the pressure, is we don't have to come up with something brand new all the time. I'm not even sure I'm really good at that. But I want to take what we know we do and make it better. And so that's what I feel like right now where I contribute innovative thoughts and push us to be innovative is it's not recreating the wheel. It's taking the wheel and figuring out a way to make it roll better in a sense. And so those are the kinds of things I'm always pushing. How do we do it better? How do we do it better? How do we do it better? What's 1% better we can get in that area? What's 1% better that we can get in that area? So I feel like I'm just trying to lead the way of keeping that in front of people, to keep innovating, keep doing what we do, keep tweaking as we go.
One of your roles over the years, I think almost 25 years, is you've been a pretty consistent preacher. How has preaching changed over your lifetime?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm seeing right now in what I'm seeing here in our context. And even as I talk to people around the country, I think it's happening much broader than just where I'm at right now. There seems to be, I don't have a good word for it, but there seems to be an openness in people, a sort of a renewed sense of openness in people, culturally even, to talking about spiritual things, to church. And so here's the way I've been talking about it recently. When people come into our church now, when people come to LCBC, they are there because they know why they want to be there. And they probably already checked us out. So, the online space is our atrium now. That's our, some people talk about it like that's our porch, right? We know that. People have already had an experience, more than likely, with our church. So my point is, when they're here, I feel like I don't have to work as hard to win their ear anymore. I think that's already been done just because of the ubiquity of technology nowadays. And then I also think there's an openness. I think you've got the technology side that's really made content ubiquitous. And so people have probably already seen what you're doing. Secondly, I also think there's an openness because I just think that the last 5 years, institutions have failed the broader culture. And what people looked to as far as truth, to find a sense of truth, in institutions like politics, institutions like media, traditional media, all that, that's all gone now. And I think most people understand, even if they can't articulate it, they sort of intuit, I don't know what to trust anymore. And so when they come into church, what I'm seeing right now is it just feels like people are just going, just tell me the truth. Just tell me the truth. And so again, I feel like we can get, from a preaching standpoint, we can get there quicker. I still want to be winsome. And we still work very hard. I want to work very hard at being winsome. But I just don't have to work as hard at, again, winning your ear when you're here. You know why you're here. And so I've just found that that's a little bit of a shift. I also find that people I'm seeing right now that, and other people that I know around the country, and I'm feeling it as well, to just, from a clarity standpoint, just the gospel, just say it straight up. And I know that sounds ridiculous, almost coming from a pastor, but I actually think context always matters. And I think 20, 25 years ago, one of the primary questions people were wondering and asking was, is the church relevant to my life? I don't think that question ever goes away, by the way, but I don't know if that's the fundamental question, because I think, again, if they're here, they've already answered, I think it might be. So now it's more just, can you tell me the truth and tell it in a way that makes sense to me? So relevancy is not, cultural relevance to me is not being cute. Relevance is about my heart beats a little bit faster because you just told me something that's true. So when someone speaks relevantly into your life, it means they saw you and spoke directly to the needs that you have. That's relevancy. Which sort of self-explanatory. You're irrelevant if you're not seeing me and speaking directly to me. So I don't think that ever goes away. I just don't think that people from a cultural, I don't think we have to go, hey, we're cool. What we have to offer people is, here's what's true, and we're going to do it in a way that is as clear as possible. But we're not going to, we can just go right there now.
I think you're right. It's kind of like from relevance to resonance. You know what I mean? Is this resonating, as opposed to, you don't have to quite skip a step. But that whole idea of like, hey, you probably don't know what this dialogue is about. It's about X, Y, Z. It's like, nah, you know what this dialogue is about. So let's just go there. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. And and I don't want to overstate and say that, like, I'm still going to use every cultural good artifact I can do to try to bridge gap. I think we're being irresponsible as pastors if we don't do that. All I'm trying to say is, you just don't have to work as hard to win. They're coming open. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I want to engage that right away, not dance around that.
Drilling down a little bit more, what are the things that are resonating in preaching now versus things that maybe resonated 10 years ago that aren't resonating anymore?
Yeah, there seems to be, people want to know what the Bible says. And again, some of this stuff is going to sound almost so ridiculously nonsensical. Like, what did they not care 10 years ago? I just think it's a different thing now. I think, and again, technology's changed the game. And but people want to know what the Bible says. And so we're going to probably get there quicker and just say, hey, look, this is what the passage is. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk this through. I think that's one. I don't know if that's a shift, but that's something that I feel like that we're seeing. People also want to know, who's God? Is God big? And what does it have to do with my life? And how does it change me? There's a lot of, what's interesting, Carey, that I see right now is, like, when you think about generations for a second, there was a lot of deconstructing that had to happen 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because you had a whole generation, Gen X, that kind of grew up pseudo-churched, whether that was Catholic, mainline, whatever it might be, right? And I just mean, when I say pseudo church, like maybe they weren't really, maybe they were creasers and all that, but there was a Judeo-Christian ethos in the air, at least. So now they've all had kids who are 22, 23, 25 years old. They don't have, and because of that, they kind of backed away from the church. Those 23, 24, 25-year-olds now, they have they don't have as much deconstructing to do. Theirs is just construction. And to me, this is the most fun right now, because I don't have to take as much time to deconstruct things. I have to take some time to deconstruct things culturally, like what you've seen out there on TikTok that said, this is what a Christian is. Actually, no. What they've seen politically, this is what a Christian, no. So I have to deconstruct some of those things culturally, but not necessarily the religious baggage that comes with some things. And so now I can just build up and just say, hey, this is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. We're going to make it real simple. So I don't know if that's a shift, but that's just, again, those are things that I feel like I'm seeing right now.
Well, switching gears a little bit, you took over a thriving mega church from a founder, one of the biggest in the country. Not an easy job. What prepared you to become lead pastor? What are the skills? And I know it's kind of an awkward question, but I'm sure David, the founding pastor, David Ashcraft, saw things in you that he said, you're ready for this. When you look back on your own life, what prepped you for that move into the senior leader seat?
Yeah, well, David and I started talking. So David, for all intents and purposes, is a founder leader of this church, and had been here for 32 years. And so the church grew up with David, very, very long time. And David is one of the strongest leaders in the country. I think he's one of the best leaders in the world. And he is also one of the most unassuming leaders. David,
he's I'd love to have him on the podcast someday, but he's very, you wouldn't pick him out of a lineup that guy is leading something huge.
And that's his personality. That's how he likes it. And I think
might be why he's successful too.
I think that's a rare gift. Exactly. That I think has led to, his being able to lead in such a dynamic way. But David and I David got very, very challenged. I don't want to tell too much of his story, but he got very challenged by Jim Collins' idea of being a level 5 leader. And, for most of your listeners, probably have heard some of that before, but if they don't know,
Jim was on the podcast a few months ago talking about that and other things.
Yeah. So the level 5 leader is the leader who essentially, once you leave an organization, it's better after you leave. It's not that it just survives. It's not that it keeps going. It's that it actually becomes better.
And to your point, the key is humility. That's the difference. If humility is present, it'll get better. If it's absent, it'll probably decline.
That's right. And David was very challenged by that and really set that as his life's ambition for that next season of ministry for him. And so him and I talked 8 years before the transition happened.
It's a long time, man.
Oh, Carey, you have no clue. That was a long time. It was a long time. And what was so interesting is, at that point, it's not like David is committing to me, this is what's going to happen. He really couldn't. And it's not like I'm committing to, I'll stick around. It was more conceptual. It was, hey, so what if, hey, I think you've got some of the gifts. I think you've got some of the makeup that the LCBC would need moving forward. But there's a lot of unanswered. And so what if we just keep talking about it and praying about it? And so really for the first couple of years, we didn't talk about it all the time. We talked about it like once a year for 2 or 3 years. And we committed to reading some books together, and that was it. And I think that would have been miserable had we just been talking about it for 8 years. And so that was a little bit of a risk on David's part, because he's got to, in a lot of ways, plant the seed, because he needs to know, am I even interested? But he also, by doing that, plants a seed, which means that might get my head going in a different direction. And
it's a possible future scenario.
That's right. So we kind of, the first 2 or 3 years, it was very conceptual, and we just kind of talked. The second, we kind of looked at it in 3 phases. That first phase was just, let's just read together. Let's learn together. Let's just stay connected. The second phase was, let's identify some areas, if that's going to be where God leads, to develop you. So let's increase preaching opportunities. interaction with exec team, like beginning to lead at higher levels, some stuff like that. And then the third phase was obviously the sort of working with the board and going through all that process and with the church and all that. So we went through all of that, and the thing that from a development standpoint that was so valuable was him giving me the opportunities. But it wasn't just running the play. We had all the plays. There's books you can read about how to do it. There's great books and resources about how to do all this. But the thing that matters more than anything else from a development standpoint is time together. There's nothing that can replace that.
Wow. So you guys spent a lot of time together?
We spent more time together than we did with our families some seasons. And, which is true for most people in the workplace. You're spending, 45 hours, 50 hours a week with people. And David and I, we traveled together. I spent time with him, and, Jenny and I were in their home. We went places. Any decision towards the end that he was having to make, we were talking it out together. Because part of what he's trying to do is show me how to think, not, that's what you're trying to do, not the decision. You're trying to really implant into someone else how to come to decisions. And there's nothing that can replace that. And so that was the greatest development opportunity more than anything else. It wasn't what we read. It was the time together. And we just made a commitment, Carey. We just said, look, we're going to be ruthlessly, at times, awkwardly honest with each other through this process. Because if we don't do that, things are going to get wonky. And one of the things him and I talked about a lot was the thing that will derail this is emotions. It's not going to be the mechanics of how to do a succession plan. It will be the emotions that come up that derail this thing. And it's stupid stuff. Like, when David announced me that I was going to be the guy, they didn't clap as much as I thought they were going to clap. And did David undersell this? It's those dumb little things, that come into your head. Or, for David, it's like, well, when I announced it with Jason, they clapped louder for that than they did when I told them out. So those are the things that derail it. And we just made a commitment. If we ever felt those things, we'd talk it out with each other. And we had to. And we shed a lot of tears here in this office together, because I needed to feel what it felt like to be in his shoes, and he needed to feel what it felt like to be in my shoes. And that gave us empathy for each other. And there were times where I was like, David, it feels like the hardest time was about 4 years in, because I knew we were kind of like at the halfway point, and now I've got vision, and now I've got these things that and that was very hard, because I told him, I was like, David, this is going to sound stupid now, but at the time you're like, are my best years behind me? So again, I know it sounds ridiculous, but those are the things you think. And,
because it was an 8-year process.
Yeah. And then by that point, I don't know how old I was at that point, but probably in my early 40s. And I'm like, oh man, am I even going to be relevant anymore? And again, I know it's ridiculous, rationally speaking, but emotionally, that felt real. And, so what did I need to do? I needed to talk that out with him. And I told him, and he understood. And then he told me, well, let me tell you how I feel. I feel like I got more in the tank, and that I'm handing this. Now that's the whole goal, right? Is to hand it when you're running at your fastest, but you're still running fast. That's hard. So now I could get behind his eyes. He was getting behind my eyes, and we were able to, that just created empathy. And that's how we got through that. And it was incredible, but it was very, very challenging. And we had to be honest. Like the thing that you're like, that's the thing I don't want to say. That's probably the thing you have to say. Because that's how you don't let it grow in your head and then become, he's holding me back. That little thing moves from, I feel like I have more. Then if you don't voice that, what it becomes, that seed grows into, he's holding me back, which it grows into the tree of, I'm better off somewhere else. So that's why you got to get it out. And you got to have that relationship.
I've thought a lot about succession, been through it myself, interviewed a lot of leaders on it, but honesty hasn't really come up that frequently as a frame. And I think you're right, because what happens is everybody smiles at the meeting, and then you go home and you say to your wife, like, I think my best days are behind me. I gotta make a decision. Yep. Can you talk more about the honesty framework and maybe give a couple of more examples of when he had to get honest with you or you had to get honest with him to the level that you're comfortable? Because I think that's, I had a hard week this week, and, I was there with a colleague this morning. I don't want to get into it with, his name's Brad. I don't want to get into it with Brad. And then I did, and he goes, well, actually, me too. It's funny how the honesty really is such a powerful thing. And yet I'm always tempted to put on the game face and everything's great. What were some other examples of how honesty made that a great process for you?
I think so. Some things we had to be honest about was our fears. Hey, David, I'm afraid you're going to renege on this. You're going to get to the end of this and you're going to go, you know what? Never mind. I think I do have some. So David, I'm afraid of that. I need to be honest about my fears. He's sitting there going, I'm afraid you're going to leave before this process is up. And now you've left me.
You're afraid he's going to change his mind. He's afraid you're going to leave.
Yep. And we had to voice those fears.
Wow.
And because, again, without voicing them, they become something else. They grow into something else. I think that was one of them. One of them was a big moment. It was right at the bottom for me, as far as when I say bottom, I mean, the most challenging part was, again, that halfway point. And there was a moment where I was a campus pastor at the time. I've done a lot of different roles here. And I was a campus pastor. It was our first merger experience. And so I moved out to the Philadelphia area to bring a church online to LCBC. And so I'd been out there for about 4 or 5 years at that point. And we were still 4 years away or 5 years away from the transition happening, as far as David and I had talked about it. And one day, and a church, it was the closest I'd ever come. I'd never entertained the idea of another church. Never. But once. And some of it was the circumstances of how it kind of came about. But another was, I was at this point where I was going, I don't know if I can do this 4 more years. I've got something in me I want to bring. And I went back one day after doing, vision and offering at that campus. And I went back to this little back office. And Carey, I bawled my eyes out. I wept. I mean, like little kid weeping. It was ugly cry stuff. And it's because I thought, I can't do this. And here's what I actually felt. I've got all this vision. I've got all this something in me. And all I get is 3 minutes for some announcements. Now, that's not true. But again, it's emotions. It's not rational. So, but that's how I felt. So do you know what I did? I knew what I had to do. I had to go on that Monday or Tuesday, whenever that was, whenever we saw each other, and I had to tell him. And I didn't have to. I needed to. I needed to tell him that. So I did. I said, David, I'm wrestling. And I told him about the opportunity. I told him about it all. And you know what he did in response? We sped up the timeline.
Whoa.
And yeah. I mean, so he's sitting there going, and also he got real honest with me at that moment too, just saying, man, that's when he was kind of like, I feel like I'm going to be a lame duck though if we move it up and all that. And again, he's still running full speed. So we left that conversation so connected. Didn't solve everything right away, but connected. And that's what mattered. And so those are 2 examples of being very, very honest with each other. And so it was hard at times, but that is the key that got us through it. There is no doubt about that. That is the key.
So I want to go deeper on that, Jason, and get your advice. I talk to a lot of leaders, and the 8-year timeline is not as unusual as you think. So there are founders listening, people in David's role. There are a lot of young leaders listening in your role. And a lot of them get impatient. And I've seen it go the other way where the heir apparent leaves because this is taking forever. I've seen senior leaders change their mind. I talk to leaders who are waiting to be picked, hoping they get picked, or there's all this ambiguity around it. What would you say to the person in your shoes who's been waiting for a couple of years, is like, is this day ever going to come? What are some of the things that person should or should not do? Give them advice.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there's going to be more and more people in this kind of position.
Oh
I think,
yeah,
in the
this
years
is
to
like,
come.
this is a big boulder rolling down a hill right now.
One of the things that helped me was a reframing. And I had to start to reframe. I'm not waiting on. So here's how I started to reframe it. What am I able to do in this season that I will not be able to do ever again? What are the opportunities in this season of waiting? What are the faithful with the small things that I need to be right now that will set me up for one day something else? And I took that as a personal mission, I guess. I actually took that as, I think God's calling me, go, hey, Jace, see, everyone wants to go to the next level. Most people don't want to grow to the next level. And what happens is we get these shortcuts and we go to the next level, but because we didn't grow there, we're in over our heads. And you have to reframe to say, hey, this season, there is going to be something grown in me that could not happen any other way. And embrace it, find the positives in it, stop resisting it. It's not a negative, it's a gift. And so I wrote down a list. I could show you in a journal.
I want examples. We're taking names here. I have never heard that question. I love it. What can I do in this season that I'll never be able to do again in another season? Because I think you're right. If you're a leader, you're always living in the future. One day I will.
Yeah,
and even I'm sure as a senior pastor, you're like, well, next year, well, next fall, right?
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. I mean, very practical things. You know, we have Saturday night gatherings. So here's one I wrote down on my list. I get Saturdays with my family right now. I will have less of those. So I'm going to leverage those right now. So in this season of waiting, that is a gift that I'm going to leverage. Another one was, again, going to sound simple. What are the meetings? What are the people? Who are the people I can meet with that I might not have the margin for once all this other stuff kind of comes on? So I felt like be faithful in the small things is, if I can't take a meeting with someone now, I'm not, like, that says something about my heart condition, about like, they're not worth it now. I won't think they're worth it another, but this is an opportunity right now to take the meetings with people that I might not, because of just margin at some point, I might not be able to take all of these. So it was those kinds of things. It was looking around and going, what are the opportunities I have right now that I might not have because of margin, because of responsibility, because of workload, because of things I don't even know are going to come. And how do I see these as a gift in this moment? And so, you know, I just wrote I just started that list and I just started writing, and I probably had 10 or 11 things, and that reframed it for me. And again, and some of it, Carey, was more on the character side. And it was just, I want to grow to the place I want to go, not go there. And because I want to be ready, I want to be prepared. And I think everybody listening to this, if you're familiar with Jesus' story, I take that very seriously, and I'm sure everybody else does. If I'm faithful with the small, he will allow me to have other things in the future. So be faithful with the small right now. And so the small was Saturdays with my family. I've got to be faithful with that right now. I'm going to be faithful with taking that meeting right now. I'm going to be faithful. It's simple things. Yep.
So you step into the senior role. You've been prepping for 8 years, arguably your whole life.
Yeah.
There were surprises,
Yeah.
right? When you finally sit in that desk, occupy that office, take on that, quote, mantle of leadership, all of us get surprised. What surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think one of the things that surprised me is how lonely it felt out of the gate. It felt very lonely.
Really?
It did. And not, you know, I think there's a difference between, obviously there's a difference between isolation and loneliness. I mean, it didn't feel isolating. I knew more people than ever. But it felt lonely in the sense of, here's the best way to say it. My office, where I used to office, is 8 feet that way.
Sure.
When David was here, anytime I was making a decision or thought we should do it, you know what I could do? I could walk 8 feet down that hallway, knock on this door, and I had a backstop. And that backstop went away. That's lonely. There's a feeling that settles in on you like, oh, it's on me. And it's not. Again, some of these things are like rationally speaking, but emotionally you feel that. And obviously we have incredible teams and all that. And I'm very collaborative.
Yeah.
But there is still a sense where it's like, I got to make the decision. You got to make the decision now and stuff. So, and that's a lonely feeling. That didn't last, by the way, but that was an immediate sort of feeling.
Why did it not last?
Well, because I think number one is you get through all the first. So some of it's like your first Christmas, your first Easter, your first series, your first big challenge, whatever it might be. After you've gotten through all the first, there is a little bit of confidence that gets built. Like, okay, I've done that, and I kind of know the rhythm now, and I know what to avoid, and I know how to do that. So some of it's just confidence gets built in your decision making, and also you have time. After time, your team learns. You're learning how to relate as a team, and so they're still learning you a little bit. Even in that new role. But that was a feeling and that I had, and maybe a little bit of a surprise. But the other actually, or another, is related to what I just mentioned with the team and learning you. One of the mistakes incoming guys make, and especially incoming guys who've been in the organization. So that was my story, right? I had been here 20 years. I've been here 23 years total. I've been here 20 years before stepping into this role. A mistake that incoming guys can make is that all of those 20 years or 5 years or 10 years, how long you've been there, the trust, relational equity, that all comes with you into this new role. I don't think that's true. People need to learn to trust you in this role now. They trusted you as this. And I always say, just because you're a good father doesn't mean you'll be a good dad. You have to now, because it's a different role. It's a totally different role. And so your character as a father will probably contribute to you being a good dad. But you also, hey, there's things you're going to have to learn now being a dad. So I think it was a mistake. And I didn't do this. I think I was prepared for this, but I took it very seriously to try to earn and gain trust with people that first year, as opposed to just assuming it. Assumptions are what kill in transitions like that, because they already know me. It's like, well, they don't know you as this. And because you've been there, now here's the thing, because you've been there, that trust is built very fast. So it's sped up considerably because they do have that relational equity with you, but they're still watching. And I think if you just assume that everybody's with you just because you stepped that role and because they've known you for 20 years, I think you're making a mistake. And so there is an aspect where you've got to learn how to gain that. And the last thing, Carey, I'd probably mention with sort of maybe what surprised is, one of the things that I felt like I didn't know I was going to have to do so much is clarify how I'm different than David. And some of it was I didn't even really know. You don't totally know until you get in the role. And David and I are like 99.5% the same because that's who I grew up with. But it's that 0.5% that matters. And that can be felt by the organization or it can be felt. And so I just found myself, and so even thinking about, Carey, I know that's a topic you're interested in, founder versus second generation. Founders are the CEO, CFO, chief marketing, chief facilities. They're everything.
Well, we had to at the beginning.
They had to be. Yeah. When you have 200 people, you're closing up the building. And a lot of those founders are such incredibly high capacity. They have such an incredible high capacity because they grew up with that. And it's almost second nature to them to be able to do the preaching and the teaching and the vision and the building plans and all of that kind of stuff. That's what they did. So when I stepped in, there were people probably making assumptions. Jason's going to want to be involved in the same things that David was. But that wasn't necessarily true because David grew up with those things and took those on. And then there's things that I'm more interested in that David wasn't as interested in. And so there was a little bit of a year.
Like what? What were you interested in?
I'll give you a perfect example. This is silly. I mean, but it's small. Very, very simple one. How we engage critics on social media for the church. I'm a little bit different. David was very much kind of like, who cares? Just ignore him, whatever. I'm a little bit more, hey, if they're disagree, if they get on our Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and they disagree with something, ignore it. But if they're critiquing or if they're lying about something, address it because you're letting a lie live out there. And so that was that was a little bit of and that seems small, but that's a little from our social teams and all them, the people who are managing those accounts, all that, that's a little bit of a tweak and they didn't know. So that can feel like, oh, this is different.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different. So you just bump into those things. And I just found myself, again, it's not making assumptions. It's just going, okay, I've got to clarify. I probably got to even be more clear about these are the things that I'm interested in. These are things I'm not interested in. So
what have you learned about the weight of senior leadership? Or maybe you don't feel it the same way. Maybe you felt it exactly the same when you were in an associate role.
No, it's different. No, it's different.
Yeah, it is.
Well, what I think I've learned is the responsibility that we carry is we feel the weight of it, and it will affect personal relationships. And I can talk about that more if you want. But I also, what probably struck me was the way that the weight of that responsibility gets played out. It's not just in the decisions, it's in how you carry yourself. It's in the words that you speak. Everything you do weighs 10 times more now. And now that can work for you or against you. Again, I'm more of an optimist, so I'm going to go, I'll give you a good example. Carey, one time, I was walking through the office and someone was just telling me about a project they were working on. And, and I go, after they told me this project, I go, huh. And then I kept walking. Now, what I didn't know, because I just said that's like, that's interesting. What I didn't know is that sent them for the next hour and a half into a rethinking everything about that project, because the way they interpreted, was, oh, we must be missing something.
You're not on board. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not what I meant. But that's careless on my part. That's on me, because that's me not understanding the weight of my words and my actions. And so those little things are wake-up calls. Now, again, I don't want to be scared of that kind of stuff. To me, the optimist in me goes, so here's where the value is. One word of encouragement to a staff member that I see once, we've got lots and lots of staff spread out across a wide geographic region across the state. So once a month, everybody comes in. And if I can get 30 seconds with the staff, one thing I can notice that they did, that 30 seconds will last them 6 months. So as far as encouragement goes, so I'm going to leverage that. But you have to understand that what you think is a thump, I'm doing this with my finger right now for those who are not watching, like a little thump, feels like a punch to someone else. So that's what you have to be mindful of. And I think that's part of the weight. We're talking about the weight of responsibility. That is part of the weightiness of the role that you're in, is understanding the impact that you have with everything.
You mentioned relational dynamics, and it's interesting. I imagine there's probably a handful of people on staff who thought, I should be the new senior pastor, right? Not you. I'm wondering, with the difference, the change in relational dynamics, what have you been noticing and how have you been addressing it?
Well, Carey, we were so deliberate, and this speaks to David. David was so deliberate in making this so painfully obvious to the church and to everyone else that his goal was, when we announce it, everyone would go, yeah, duh.
And, exactly. Wait, that hasn't happened already? Yeah.
That is exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't feel, we didn't feel or sense any like, I should be doing that, or I could do that.
Oh, that's good. That's
rare. No, we didn't, fortunately didn't have any of that. What I noticed was that, again, the power dynamic shift in personal relationships that maybe you had with staff, that you were peers with, things like that. That's the shifts that are more nuanced that you have to, I think, have the emotional intelligence and maturity to dive into and to proactively bring up. There were people that I needed to meet with that I knew they weren't upset about the decision. They had to be wondering, though, how will this affect me? And sometimes I think as leaders, we because we're so optimistic, we're vision minded and all that, we need to just step back every now and then and go, hey, it's okay for people to go, yeah, what does this mean for me? I always remind people, it's like when one time my kids, for pickup at their school, they were changing the pickup line and in the time of day and where it was happening. And so they sent out this big, long email about why. They visioned it like crazy. It was like 8 pages of why this is better and your kid's going to be safer and the philosophy behind it. And the only question I was like, okay, so what time do I have to be there? Like, because just tell me how this affects me.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. And so I think sometimes we just need to, when we're stepping into roles like that, or just have the maturity to go and proactively address that with some people. And I knew that there were a few people I needed to say, hey, you're probably wondering about some of this. I just want to be like, let's talk it out. I don't want them wondering in their head and coming up with answers that might not even be true. And so that was one aspect. I think there was another aspect of relational dynamics, though, that was, Sam Chan. I don't know if you know Sam or not, but Sam,
a little bit, yeah.
He's
another guy I need to have on the podcast.
He's become a friend, and he's so wise. And he says that every now and then he'll talk to people, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm thinking about going, and I have a college buddy that I grew up with, and he started a church out here, and he wants me to come work with him to be his executive pastor now." And Sam said he always calls the time out. It's like, hold up, you're not going to work with him, you're going to work for him. And unless you understand that, you are setting yourself up for disaster. And that's a little bit of that. What I'm talking about is there's a shift that happens interpersonally, and you've got to, I think you got to address that, and especially with personal relations, like people that you're close to, and probably just call it out and go, hey, things will probably change.
A lot of leaders lose friends when they step into the senior role. You used to be colleagues, and now all of a sudden you're their boss. Did you have that dynamic at play at all?
Yeah, I did. And it was, there's been some pain with that. And partly because you just have to live with the reality. Leaders, some of the leadership pain leaders willingly are stepping into when we take on the role of leadership is we will be misunderstood, and you got to accept that. And some of it was, I'm going to be misunderstood, and that's okay. But yeah, no, that happened. I would say that was even more painful for Jenny, to be honest. Because there's an aspect of it, Carey, when we're in it, and we're,
mm-hmm.
and
Jenny's you get the upside. She might just get the downside.
Yeah. And that was very, very hard for her. And some of the decision, some of it's happening because of decisions I made.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in there going, but I didn't make that decision. So she just has to live in the wake. And our spouses, I think, sometimes have to live in the wake. And I think we just need to be aware of that's very hard for them.
All right. I want to touch on a few things, sort of rapid fire. They're not rapid fire, but we're gonna try. Second generation leadership is different than first generation leadership, right? Like you said, the founders, you are the chief cook and bottle washer when you start something from scratch or start when it's very small, and you got to do everything. I've been there, and then all of a sudden you're leading this massive 25 location thing. But you inherit a large, tens of thousands of people call this church home, tens of thousands attend organization. What are you noticing about the skill set that second generation leaders need versus first generation?
Yeah, I think that, one's a character thing, and then I can talk about skill set. One is, this is a little bit more of a character thing. Second generation leaders, you cannot be threatened by nostalgia. You cannot take nostalgia personally. And you will have people, in fact, you want that. You're going to have people who talk about the good old days and talk about how it was back then. And if you take that as a criticism of your leadership, you're going to spiral. And so you have to give space to honor the past. And I think some second generation leaders struggle with that a little bit because they take that personally. You just can't go there.
How did you learn that? Because I've seen that dynamic be very real. People talk about the good old days and do you remember when? And it's like, well, that wasn't on my watch. How did you get to the point where you're secure with that?
Well, Jesus.
Good answer.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, there was a lot of work that, I'm kind of being serious. There was a lot of work God had to do in my heart. When we were going through the whole process, Carey, one of the things I feel like one of the phrases that I feel God kind of gave me through it that guided me and helped me was, you're not auditioning, because everything that matters most about you has already been settled on the cross. That's freeing. And if that's true, and there's days I struggle to believe that, but now I would say it's embedded in my heart. I'm not auditioning, because everything that matters most about me has already been settled. And that's why when that is tattooed and branded on your heart, you're able to take criticism without being crushed by it. You're able to honor the past without feeling threatened. You're able to go into hard situations with joy, with a certain kind of joy. It's not always joyful, but a certain kind of joy and peace. You're able to preach out of a place of love and not need. And I felt freed with some of that. And again, I'm not trying to pretend that doesn't creep up, because it does creep up. But I would say there was a fundamental shift in me about 6 years ago where God had to do a lot of work and remind me of that. And it embedded itself into my heart. And so honestly, Carey, I still tell myself that. And so if I feel and I do, I feel threatened at time, and I feel angry about what do you, and I have to come back to that. I'm not auditioning. What am I doing here? This isn't mine to begin with. And I'm not auditioning, because everything that matters most about me has already been settled on the cross. So I can celebrate what happened then.
Yeah.
I can celebrate that David was better than me at those things. It's not I can accept it. I can celebrate those things. So it was a heart work, man, that needed to happen to me.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And you are not the first person I have met that has struggled with that. It's almost like you're tempted to criticize the past because it makes you look good, right? Or dismiss it. So the first thing's character. What was the second thing you were going to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's the difference between building a home and moving into a home that's already been built, right? In a sense.
Yeah.
And a founder built the thing. They know the foundations and all that. And when I'm coming in second generation, I do have by the way, I'm unique in a sense that I was here for 20 years. So many of the decisions that were made and all of that, I was a part of those decisions. But I would say that one of the things a second generation leader needs to do is they need to remember there's a reason the walls are where they are. There's a reason why the foundation's laid. There's a reason why that room was added over there in the house. There's a reason. So you can't dismiss those things out, even though you might see that you want to redecorate a little bit. So I would say it's being mindful that and the reason you're there, by the way, is because you love the home. You might want to redecorate and you might have some additions and all that, but you love the home, or else you wouldn't be there. And so remember that. And so I would just say that's more of a posture again, and maybe more of a framing concept. I would think that what the second generation leader needs to be very, very, very committed to clarifying and coming back to what will never change. This is what will never change. This is what will never change. This is what will never change. And it's what is it? It's the mission, vision, and values almost always, right? And so our church was built on the idea that we'll do anything to reach lost people. That will never change. The home may look a little different. We might redecorate, we might do some additions and all that kind of stuff, but that's never changing. And I think as a second generation, being mindful of that and giving voice to that puts people at ease. And also, I think inspires confidence that that the foundation isn't going to shift. And then, one other thing, Carey, I would just say is like, I just had to learn, all the business acumen stuff from just what we do as a church. David created it. I had to dive deep into it. And again, it was already there because it was I was here for 20 years, but I had to dive deep to put it in my own words. So like a great example is, we know, someone asked me, this was right after the transition happened. And we've just seen incredible growth. it's been pretty amazing to watch what God's done in the last few years. And someone asked me over dinner one night, they go, why are you growing? Why do you think LCBC is growing like it is? And I was so exposed. I didn't have a good answer. And that bothered me. And so I went back and I dug in. And by the way, everyone should have an answer to that question. Why is God, if your church is growing, why? And the way to get to that answer is not complicated. All you need to do is listen to your people. Why are they coming back? Why are they coming back? And why are they bringing people with them? And you listen to those themes, and that's what your focus is. And so for us, relevant gatherings that are simple and applicable. That's why. Because people tell us all the time, I felt like you guys were talking right to me. For the first time, I understood the Bible. The worship was so engaging. The second one is dynamic kid and student ministry. You come and you have a great experience in the gathering and your kids go, man, people were mean to me. You're not coming back. So we got to have time. And we have a responsibility to prepare this next generation to hand this church to them. The third thing for us is it's easy to be needed and known here. People tell us all the time. I just felt like I came in. I felt like I met people right away. I felt like I could, it was easy to get plugged in, all that kind of stuff. And the last one is we shock people with personal care and follow through. People tell us all the time, I cannot believe. One of the things we do, Carey, we still do this to this day. The second time you come, and I don't know many churches that still do check-in. We still do check-in at the size. And it's crazy. I mean, so thousands of people let us know every week I'm here. And lots and hundreds of first-time guests every week. The second time you check in, we deliver homemade cookies to your doorstep. It doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter. We'll do it anywhere. That was true when we had 10 people. It's true if we've got 500 in a particular week we've got to go do. We're doing it. That's shocking people with your personal care and follow through. And so that's our 4 things. And we obsess over those. We focus on those. It's like these 4 things we got to do great. And my point is, I had to, as a second generation, I had to go and find that. I knew it. It was all in the air already. I didn't build that necessarily, but I had to go dig into that, find it, put it in my words, and now clarify it for everybody else. So I'm not sure if that's helpful or not, but it's just digging into the things that are intuitive to you and clarifying them.
So you're taking me back 20 years, the whole check-in idea. I remember even as a kid, there was what do they call it? The ritual of friendship or something. It was some kind of like form you filled out every week, and then it went digital, and then most churches dropped it. And the whole idea that on your first or second visit, I know one of my mentors, he had like a loaf of bread that would be delivered to your house. And it feels so old school, but you're suggesting that is really working today. Do you want to say more about that?
Listen, this is a big focus for us right now. Every year, it's not even just related to a year, but we kind of move in seasons of themes, okay? The theme for us right now that I kind of put in front of our staff in January, put in front of our church, I don't know if it'll be a year, I don't know if it'll be 2 years, doesn't really matter. For right now, it's a theme, and it'll be a theme until feels like it's not. Make it personal. That's it. Make it personal. We tell our staff all the time, I try to tell them, I'm like, look, your job is different than your responsibility. You can do your job and not carry out your responsibilities. Your job is the stuff that's on the description, but your responsibility is to be personally invested in people's lives. That's all. The job description is an excuse to do that and to make it personal. So the thing, Carey, for us as leaders, one of the things that we're trying to do as leaders always is look around corners that other people aren't looking around and saying, hey, it's not disruptive now. It's not an issue now, but it could be. And then you go, let's fix it now before it becomes an issue. And for me, as I look around a corner right now, we're more organized than ever before. We're more to get to 25 locations, you got to be really tight on your system.
Got to be so dialed in.
You got to be dialed in. We know what we do, all that kind of stuff. Here's one of my biggest fears right now is that because of that, we've got a bunch of staff who just run plays without thinking. So they're running the plays because they got it. And it loses its soul. And we forget it was John that got us into this. It wasn't to run plays. It was that one person, right? It was ministry. And so the thing we're talking about a ton now, I keep telling them, is the bigger we get, the smaller we have to feel to people. People don't care about how big the church is. They only care about, did you notice me when I walked in? Do you have a place for me? Was it real? Did you know? So when we talk about make it personal, this is a huge issue for us right now. And one of the things that we've done to support that is, like, we run what we call an attendee onboarding process. We actually ran this for 18 months. We tweaked it and did a bunch of A/B testing and all this kind of stuff. And here's what we found. We can show you the data on this. This is for LCBC at least. And my guess is it's probably true for everywhere. But a person who has 10 personal contacts, so a first-time guest who comes and they have 10 personal contacts within 16 weeks of their first visit, is 280% more likely to be at church a year from now than a person who did not. 10 seems to be that match. We
and what is a personal contact?
So we define those, and I'm not going to be able to probably list all of them. A personal connect, we have like a list of 6 that count as a personal connection. So that can be literally a phone call. That could be an atrium conversation, and then you'd mark that. That can be cookie drops that I was just telling you about. That's a personal connection that happens after your second time. And so we have a whole process. We call it our attendee onboarding process. And so we have a play that our staff runs now. So within that first 16 weeks, we know how to get you 10 connection points. And again, you're 280% more likely to be around a year from now than someone who got 6. And we don't do it perfect, but it is a process and we hold accountable to that. I think what I'm trying to get at is this right now is the thing for us to how to make a big church feel small. We have to keep innovating around these ways, in these areas. We have to keep pushing in these areas. And this is a huge, huge focus for us right now.
Just so people know, how many people are attending on a weekend now, typically?
We've got about 20. We'll bump up to 20,000 in the rooms, and online is a huge part of what we do. We'll have another, 8,000 or 9,000 online, depending on the week. And when we say online, by the way, everybody measures that different. We're very conservative with that. Ours is you have to watch 30 minutes or we don't count you. It's not a click for us. Yeah, it's not a click for us. It's definitely 30 minutes or it doesn't count. So we've got about 25,000 actively involved in our weekends right now. So
that's so amazing. And you've seen that spike with the leadership change. Not everybody sees that.
100%. Yeah. And again, I think that ultimately, Carey, because the mission didn't change. It really
All right.
didn't.
Final question for you. This has been so fascinating, Jason. I talk to a lot of people, and I've tried to squash this, but like a bug, sometimes you think you squashed it, still living, still moving. And the question is, people say, well, the reason we're not growing is our location. So I've been to LCBC. Guys are in the sticks, okay? I mean, you really are. You have locations in Philly, et cetera. But
you know
like
what
you
we
go
think
there.
of Canada, don't you, Carey?
Yeah. I mean, there's
That's
cows. You have cows for neighbors, right?
We do.
So, I mean, talk to the leader who's like, well, the reason we're not growing is we're in the wrong part of town. We're in a rural community. We're blah, 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 blah. Talk to them about where you can grow a church.
Well, first, let me just maybe encourage, / challenge. If you're in a town of 10, let's just say you're in a town of 10,000 people, unless you're telling me that every one of those 10,000 people knows Jesus and has an active, dynamic relationship with Jesus, you have room to grow and there's growth opportunities. So to me, the setting is not your limiter. And I wouldn't even think about that. I think you need to go, hey, what do we need to be faithful to? It doesn't matter our context. We don't even think, we've got teams that think about a lot of that kind of stuff, but I feel like our job as leaders is to go, it doesn't matter. Put me in a town of 100 people, put me in 100,000. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to be about reaching people. We're going to be about making our love easy to see so that people come into an active and dynamic relationship with Jesus Christ. And we will reach, only God knows the ceiling. I'm not going to place it. So that's probably my encouragement. Don't put a ceiling that God did not place on you in your church. You just be faithful. You go out and you get in that community and you try to win everybody you know to Jesus Christ. And you see, just let God do that other part, which he will. But he promised, I will draw him into myself and the gates of hell will not prevail because he will build his church. And that does not matter if it's a town of 100 or 100,000. So go for it. Do not be self-limiting in that.
We were joking about that at lunch. I got my buddy Mark Clark in town. We're doing some work together this week. And he's like, you really do live in the country. I'm like, yeah, you can do almost anything from anywhere. It's amazing. So Jason, this has been so encouraging. You've got a new book called No Easy Jesus. It's available everywhere. People want to track with you online. Where's the best place to find you these days?
Social media. Find us. Find me on all the different platforms. Jason Mitchell Words, I think, on Instagram and all that. And then LCBC Church. You can find us as well. We'd love for you to track along with what God's doing here and come alongside everybody else as well. So,
hey, I so appreciate this. Till next time, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Carey.